Well, and with that inspiration, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the panel discussion on selling peace. I'm Julia Roig, and I'm the president of Partners for Democratic Change, and I'm also on the board of the Alliance for Peacebuilding. And it's my pleasure to welcome our panel to talk with us today about this issue of selling peace, which I think builds quite nicely on the lunch discussion we just had with Susan and John, especially when John really highlighted the need for us to be taken seriously as a field. When we were talking about the topic for this discussion this afternoon about, well, who are we selling peace to and for what purpose? You know, a lot of what we come together at this conference for is to see the power of us as a field together. And one of the powerful things that we have is around how we message what we do, how we build support for what we do with both policymakers, with the general public, with the people that we work with on the ground. So a lot of these communications tools and messaging are very powerful within our work, but they're also powerful with regards to building more support and to be taken more seriously. So I'm going to introduce just very briefly our panel. You have their bios in your materials. But here to my left is Peter Loge. He's the Vice President for External Relations here at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Liz Schrayer is the Executive Director of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. And then Dave Loew, you can thank for the creative and very inspirational advertisement that we just saw. He was a part of the team that put that together, and he's the Executive Vice President and Executive Creative Director at Loew Burnett here in the US. And so without further ado, we're gonna have the panelists speak for about 10 minutes each on this idea of how we sell peace, and then we'll have enough time for questions in the audience.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Melanie, for inviting me to join the panel. According to the email I got about this panel, it's going to be one of the real standouts of the conference. So no pressure, but looking forward to the Q&A. My initial note to my co-panelists a week or so ago, I suggested I'd serve as something of a semi-contrarian, and in true contrarian spirit, I've changed my mind. I will, however, reserve my right to be the panel's token crank and also to cite Aristotle. The panel is a terrifically important one. In the words of Above the Law, from the Pump Up the Volume soundtrack. But peace, I think we all want peace, but it's too much to face, it's too hard to reach. The question of how to get peace, as the lyric implies, is one that neither Above the Law nor Christian Slater could answer in that classic film. Part of the challenge, though, may be embedded in the title of this session, and that's what I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about. The title is, of course, Selling Peace, How Actors from Business, Media, and Policy Communities Talk About Peace. Let's start with what follows the colon. How actors talk about peace. The implied premise of this syntactical descriptor is that how they talk about something matters. This is an interesting premise. If the point is to sell peace or cheese or your old sofa on Craigslist or whatever, it's more important to know how they listen about it than how they talk about it. How one talks can give us clues to how one listens. We tend to behave our metaphors, after all, but the point is the listening. It's a truism that what you say matters far less than what is heard. In the rhetoric, as promised, Aristotle notes that there are three elements to a speech: the speaker, the topic, and the audience, and it's the last of these that's the most important. Further, Aristotle notes that in deliberative speech, which is speech about the future or about something which is unknown, or the best course of action, the audience is made up of those who can do something about the topic at hand. For Aristotle, in many cases, it was the judge. Aristotle also argues that something is persuasive if there is someone whom it persuades. Arguments do not exist in the abstract or in a vacuum. Arguments exist in an audience. Finally, for our purposes at the moment at least, Aristotle points out that it is often most persuasive to remind people of what they already believe to be true, to use shortcuts into existing views to help make the case for new ideas rather than try another tactic. I should note at this point, I think my team might have a Loge drinking game where every time I say the word Aristotle, they have to take a shot. So if you need anything out of the External Relations Division at USIP, you might want to wait until tomorrow to ask for it. Aristotle. The task of those of us in this selling business, which is all of us, is to learn how those with power think about our goals, what they already believe to be true, and to remind them of that. It's far easier to persuade someone of something they already think is true than it is to get them to think something new. Now I want to turn to the first half of the title of today's session, Selling Peace. To your point, who precisely are we trying to buy what precisely? As Above the Law notes, we all want peace. But what is it? How do I make it? How do I buy it? How do I make it happen? The Coke ad, which is really terrific, I mean, holy cow, that's fantastic. It takes this generalized notion, right, that we all want peace, that we all believe that our similarities are more important than our differences. It takes this thing we all want to believe to be true, that if it weren't for the walls and the politicians, we'd all get along. The walls and politicians create artificial divisions. And we all really, ultimately, want to live in peaceful harmony. We hope, to quote Sting, multifaceted musical taste here, we hope that the Russians love their children too. It's a terrific ad. And it's great at selling Coke, which is, after all, the point of the ad. I want peace. Peace feels good, right? But it's squishy. It's amorphous. I don't know what to do about it. I can't put my hands on it. I can't describe it, right? But for $1, I can buy a Coke and maybe a smile. Coke has located the resolution to the desire for the sublime notion of peace in the form of a sugary carbonated beverage. It is brilliant. The ad works in part because the goal is clear. We know the goal, sell Coke. Peace is good. I have no doubt you want peace, right? I'm not casting aspersions. But the point of the Coca-Cola company is to sell Coca-Cola. And selling Coca-Cola and the things that Coke does can lead to better things. It can lead to more stable economies. Because in stable economies, people do things like buy Coke, right? It can lead to cleaner water, because Coca-Cola is bottled locally around the world, which relies on a regular supply of clean water, right? Coke does some terrific work with the World Wildlife Fund, in part for that reason. Coke also knows who its buyers are, knows its audience, people who embrace a feel-good, possibly nostalgic, optimistic view, a little romantic. Skate punks for watching Pedro Barros catch Big Air on the Do Tour, not the audience for that ad. So how does one operationalize peace? Is it funding a pro-peace messaging on rickshaws, sponsoring street artists, both of which USIP is doing? The rickshaws in Pakistan, the street artists as part of the Peaceful Elections campaign in Afghanistan? Is it funding, say, a hypothetical group of about 350 or so professionals working in DC and on the ground in conflict zones with a mission of preventing, mitigating, and resolving violent conflict, hypothetically? Is it attending church services of your neighbor's faith? Is it a block party? Is it attending a 3-party talk or a Track 1.5 dialogue? What precisely is it? What is this thing in itself? Equally critically, to whom are these things, this notion, being sold? All of us, like Above the Law, want peace. None of us can fund the aforementioned hypothetical institution of 350 or so folks working to prevent, mitigate, and resolve violent conflict globally, at least not on our own. Only you can prevent forest fires, but only the congressional appropriators can make sure I get paid. Not to put too fine a point on this, but if the point is funding programs globally, my dad doesn't really matter. My dad's a good guy. I was at a retirement fete for him last night. He's beloved by his colleagues. It was sort of astonishing to see how many people turned out. But at this point, he's a former academic administrator living in New Haven, Connecticut. The chair of the House Appropriations Committee is Kay Granger, Republican of Texas, to whom my father, as nice and good a man as he is, doesn't mean 2 bits. That's right. Now what? First, as we engage in the larger, more important discussions of how our world can manage conflict in ways that don't turn violent, resolving the anarchy-sovereignty problematic, for those of you taking notes, and there will be a quiz later on this bit, we also need to think really specifically. What does a piece of peace look like? What's the thing? What's the action? What's the task? What's that thing that's being sold? Second, as we participate in a community of people, as we do, we are, as Aristotle noted, political animals. I'll pause for my team here for a moment. We must also determine who specifically has the power to create or block the goals at hand. Who writes the check for the rickshaw? Who participates in the election? who funds the program, who takes the action, who holds the meeting, whose dollar is being put into the vending machine of peace. That is the audience. Third, while holding our views, we must learn what those with power over the specific goals at hand find persuasive. What do they believe? How do they think about our issues? How do they think about the rickshaw or the meeting? Is it to advance national security? The rights of women? Is it God's will? Is it clean water? What is it? What do they care about? Fourth, we must learn from whom they find it persuasive. I'm not on this panel because I have some magical wisdom, and you're not listening to me because my best-selling book or popular television program. I have none of those things. I've not written a book. I do not have a television program. There is nothing magical. You're listening to me because I'm in the front of the room, and you seem like nice, polite people. Some of you work for me, so you have to pretend to nod and smile. I'm also on the panel by dint of my title and bio. This rant could have been given by most of my undergraduates at GW. Certainly the Aristotle bit could have been. Or I could have just played a tape of Aristotle's rhetoric for you. That's two more. But it wouldn't have resonated as much. The messenger matters. I have the title, I have the bio. We now must finally deliver that message from the right messengers to that right audience. We must identify, it's part of our task. We have multiple tasks. One is to consider the notion of peace and conflict in a violent world, and how do we, as advocates, as scholars, as citizens, deal with that. In the very immediate, though, we also have to figure out what are the little pieces of it that we can pull off? What are the little chunks? How do we figure out who's going to pay for those chunks? And how do we get them to pay for it, if it is participating in a talk or funding a project or however it goes? And I look forward to hearing your answers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we'll keep going with Liz.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know if it's on. It's on now. Thank you, Kristen and Melanie, for inviting me. It is a pleasure to really get to talk with all of you, because you really are in the trenches doing the real hard work. Now, I don't quite sell peace. What I do is, I think, a little harder, because I try to sell paying for peace. And let me tell you how hard that is in this environment. So what I'm going to walk you through is some of the tools that I have used to get policymakers up on Capitol Hill to pay for peace. So let me explain what I'm going to do, and I'm going to use a couple slides to help explain it. So what does paying for peace mean? So I advocate for a little 1% of the federal budget called the International Affairs budget that pays for the programs that exist in this building and pay for basically our peacekeeping missions and our peacekeeping and peacebuilding federal taxpayer dollars. And so how do you sell that? It's not easy. And when you think about it, I'm going to bring it down to three things: messenger, message, and showing results. This is the International Affairs budget over about a 40-year period of time. And you see that real big dip? It is a period of time, not unlike today, when there's an isolationist view in this world where there's too many people up on Capitol Hill that think that we should pull back. That is the period of time pre-9/11, post-Cold War, when there were people in Congress that literally were bragging that they didn't own passports and thought that was a good thing. So that is when an organization that I run called the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, that I'm proud to welcome, the Alliance for Peacebuilding in it, formed. And that organization formed because there was no voice for what we all do, which is the idea that there should be non-military engagement in the world, and there should be some resources for it. So we went out to organize them, and we knew something, that there was this wildly incorrect misinformation about what America spends. Now, this is on foreign assistance, but it's about not how we engage in the world, and you know these polls. For 40 years, they've shown the exact same numbers, give or take a few percentage points. How much do we spend on foreign assistance? American public say somewhere around 25%. Well, we think 10% is okay when we ask the American public, and we know it's about 1%. government. So we went out and said, okay, America, are there people who believe that we should be engaged in the world? Not that for us, we're not against military engagement, but we think that there is also a role for civilian engagement as well. So we went out and we created what the Washington Post called a Strange Bedfellow Coalition. And these are we have 400 businesses and nonprofits that range from CARE to Caterpillar to the Chamber of Commerce, Bread for the World, Save the Children. And we show up on Capitol Hill to the people who pay for peace, and they look and say, I cannot believe these people are all singing off the same song sheet to talk about everything from UN peacekeeping to Syrian refugee humanitarian support that are all walking into our offices asking for it. But we don't just come in with businesses and nonprofits. We also have an incredible credibility of bipartisan support. So we have an advisory council that is led and chaired by Colin Powell. It includes every former living Secretary of State from Henry Kissinger to Hillary Clinton on it, gives enormous credibility. So again, going back to messengers matter, and I think it fits nicely into what Peter just said. Now, one of the most important messengers is a group that we put together, and USIP is brilliant about this as well, and that is what I call the brass tops. We have over 150 retired 3- and 4-star generals who have gone and engaged with us on these issues. They are from every branch of government, and these folks come up to Capitol Hill with us. This is a picture of just an advocacy day we put together about a month ago. In the middle, you probably can't see it, but it's Senator John McCain with, these are 40 years of military service, and they went up to Capitol Hill, and guess what they talked about? Not what was happening at the Pentagon. They talked about the little 1%. They talk about what a lot of you in this room do each and every day, about why it is so important. If you want peace in the world, guess what? You need to invest not just in hard power. You need to invest in the work that you're all doing. But we also have organized over 30,000 what we call veterans for smart power, and I'm going to get to the message. We also have organized around the country, but guess what? You all know this. All politics is local. This is where we live. We're not in every state, but we're in a lot of states. And we have forums. I just was in Florida on Monday. I've been in North Carolina, I'm in Fargo, North Dakota, all over the country, where we bring local constituents together. And this is a typical network of ours. This is in Tennessee. Anybody here from Tennessee? Well, you should join us. We need you. But we put together, you'll know a lot of these names if you can read this close, but we put a lot of these names together where we have, and why are we in Tennessee? You probably know, because Senator Corker is the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and every now and then he needs a little hug to say thank you for being about engagement in the world, because guess what? There are some members in the Senate that don't believe America should be engaged in the world. So part of what the message I want to say to you is the messenger matters. Second thing, the message. So our message is a couple things that I think really has worked for us. If you want to sell peace, you got to pay for peace. Well, how do you get people to save peace? Now, I wish it was all about it's the right thing to do. I wish I could walk up there every day on Capitol Hill and say this is about saving lives, creating opportunities. This is the feel-good stuff. Not going to work in this environment alone, but it does work. But you got to couple it with it's the smart thing to do. And it's about our security, and it's about our prosperity, and you know that as well as I do. Let me talk about the security, but I also want to end with talking about the economics. The security. After 9/11, everybody kept focusing about how do you reorganize this country in terms of homeland security, and that was all everybody did. But there's a big chapter in the 9/11 Commission report that talked about the conditions, and I want to read one sentence. Our threats from conditions are not from country. Our threats come from conditions, not countries. Poverty, infectious diseases, weak and fragile states, corruptions, environmental, water, energy. What does it sound like? Not what people at DOD do. People at state, USD, MCC, OPIC, TDA, all the things that happen in the civilian side. And not surprising, ever since 2002, our national security strategy has what I call the 3D framework, development, diplomacy alongside defense, and this gets deeper and deeper and deeper, more integrated in our national security strategy when you read it in 2002, 2006, 2010, and then one will come out in 2014 that you just see integrated everything that the civilian development, diplomacy, peacekeeping stuff is just integrated into what we view as our national security strategy. The framework that we really built around is this idea of the smart power framework. Who saw Charlie Wilson's War? Everyone. Remember the last scene in the war in the movie? Charlie Wilson goes to the Intelligence Committee, which is really weird that he went to the Intelligence Committee. But he goes to the Intelligence Committee and he's trying to get it as the Soviets go out of Afghanistan. He tries to get $100 million for to build schools and roads in Afghanistan. And a congressman looks at him and says, "What do you think you are, the congressman from Kabul?" You can't even pronounce it. And they say no. $100 million. We've been spending about $1 million per troop. We spent $2 million per troop this year alone. Can you imagine what if? So I watched that movie and I said, you know what? I want to go find Charlie Wilson. Before he died, I did, luckily. And I got him to sign an op-ed calling it Charlie Wilson's Peace. And a quote, "If we have done the right thing in Afghanistan then, following up on our military support with the necessary investments in diplomacy and development assistance, we would have better secured our own country's future, as well as peace and stability in the region." This was incredibly popular on Capitol Hill, as you can imagine. As you know, so we put together a smart power focus on everything that we do. Hillary Clinton, we ran a campaign that we don't have time to go into, but I'm happy to answer about in the questions. And the headline in the Washington Post after the day of her confirmation said "Smart Power Confirmation." And I'm very proud of the work we did, and a lot of other people contribute to it. And throughout her whole confirmation, her focus was on smart power. And this is a program that we did, and you had 3 secretaries of the cabinet that all sat for an hour just talking about these issues. And the very last question was, well, how do you know it will work? And my favorite answer was from Bob Gates, Secretary of Defense. And he says, you know what it will work? It's what you don't see that will be the success. Less conflict, less requirement for American soldiers, more stability and peaceful development. Messenger and message. Last thing I want to say, I know I'm out of time, but I just want to say one last thing if I can, Julie. We did a lot on security. It's a very powerful message. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't get the economic case, we cannot sell peace. So for the last 3 years, I've spent an enormous amount of time making the case that investment in peace building, investment in the civilian side, and development diplomacy has to connect to our economic message. We have to remember that 95% of the world's consumers live outside of the United States, and the fastest growing economy is in the developing world. And if we don't invest in building stability overseas, we are going to be left out competitively. That is going to be, the smart power framework has to include the economic message. I have about a 60-second video that we put together with kids, which is cute. I won't show it now because of time. But it is really a very powerful message, and it's very effective. And the reason it's so important is because members of Congress may do it because it's the right thing. They may do it because they get the security. But if we can't answer how it helps brings jobs back here, they aren't going to pay for it. And we need to make sure that they actually put taxpayer money in to support our peace-building efforts around the world.
Thank you, Liz. And maybe what we can do is try and end the panel discussion with the 60-second video so we don't miss out on that. Because I do think seeing the effective message is very powerful to get what these folks are talking about. And just by way of just welcoming David to the panel, to acknowledge, we're really talking about policymakers, we're talking about funders, we're talking about selling peace so that people are funding our work and supporting our work. And we really, and I was struck by the power of partnership that you were mentioning, just the people that we're bringing into this message. and these platforms. And I really am very grateful that David agreed to be here with us, because I think for those who are perhaps in a different sector, in the marketing and public relations and advertising, who are working with the private sector, probably think even a little bit differently than we think about how we sell our work. And so, the Alliance is making a very big effort to bring in other fields into our discussions. And so I'm really grateful that you're here to also, from your perspective as a professional in this messaging, to share your wisdom with us.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me. This is very important work that you're doing, and I've gotten a real crash course in this. I used to think an hour ago what I did was important, selling light beer, Buicks, Happy Meals, incredibly important. And then Mr. Marks talked about stopping genocide in Burundi. And now I'm not so sure that my job is important. But we will persevere and see if we can sell peace. So before we can persuade people to buy anything, we have to understand what's going on in their hearts and minds for any product. At Leo Burnett, we have 103 offices worldwide. And we're inspired by Human-centric, which is our people-centric philosophy, puts people at the center of everything we do. So that one example, again, Mr. Marks, talking about stopping genocide in Burundi by understanding that how important drumming is to that culture, and then using that to build peace and settle tension and resolve tension. That's just a brilliant understanding of people. And we try to do that at our agency, use Human-centric, no matter what product we sell. Now, I don't want to be assumptive and imply that peace is like a packaged good, a carbonated beverage, or any other product. But if we can promote peace using some of the same lessons that we use to sell more tangible products, things that people can pull off the shelf, if we can use those lessons of Human-centric, maybe we can get more people to buy peace. And no matter what we're trying to sell, we want to look at people, we want to look at human behavior, think about how to sell to them, how to talk to them. And when we do that, it's going to reveal challenges. 3 of the challenges that we consistently run into. Skepticism is one of them. People's skepticism is higher than ever. Another one, competition for their attention is higher than ever. And the other opportunity, it's a challenge and an opportunity. The era of one-way communication is over. So let's talk about skepticism. In the old days, you used to be able to tell people how great your product was. Now they do not believe you. So how do we sell peace when people don't believe anything? What institutions, what corporations, what brands say? They don't believe what governments say. That skepticism is fueled by an increasingly transparent world where information flows freely. Anyone with a smartphone and a Twitter account can be a reporter. Phone conversations with racist NBA owners and NSA documents are leaked online. People can see through the words and actions of governments and into the walls of corporations. Even Swiss bank accounts are no longer opaque. What is the world coming to? So how do we, with this widespread skepticism, how do we talk to people? Well, you think about 1971, Coca-Cola ran a commercial called Hilltop with the song, I apologize profusely for my voice, I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. That's a nice feel-good commercial. But to truly overcome skepticism, feel-good work is probably not going to do the trick anymore. Instead of telling people about peace, telling them they should want it, we have to prove it. And what's happening at Leo Burnett more often, we're finding ourselves moving beyond ads and moving into acts. So acts would be a real world stunt or a social experiment, like you saw with Small World Machines, where we feature real people responding to some sort of creative stimulus designed to provoke a real, unscripted human reaction. That's how we want to prove that a particular product, a particular subject is important to people. Get a real human reaction from real people, not necessarily actors. So Small World Machines made peace less of an abstraction, and it gave people something that they could actually touch and feel. When they're touching that screen, they're touching the hand of someone. Someone is in Pakistan, the other person is in in India, they're touching their hand in real time through technology. And the nice thing about it, the technology disappears, and it's just one-on-one human interaction. And what we like about this idea, why I think it resonated, it converted peace from just a theory into something that people could feel. Wanted to show you another example of putting proof in people's hands. Our sister agency in Sri Lanka did a piece called the Unity newspaper. They had a terrible 25, 30-year civil war there. And they worked with one of the large papers on the island to create this newspaper.
In 2009, Sri Lanka's brutal 30-year civil war finally came to an end. 4 years on, and though progress had been made, the process of reconciliation is still not complete. Other, a mass-market daily newspaper, felt strongly that it could and should do more. The Sinhalese and Tamils, the two communities divided by the war, celebrate their traditional New Year on the same day. This occasion presented a unique opportunity, but the challenge was to find a way for a newspaper to help bridge the gap between two communities who spoke completely different languages. Our solution was to reach out to both of them by creating Sri Lanka's first bilingual newspaper. For Other, this was a big change, so to raise awareness prior to publication, we created a teaser campaign that united similar sounding characters from the alphabets of the two languages. This was extended to profiling cover pictures on Facebook based on the first letter of a person's name. Even celebrities and dignitaries commented on how historic and important a bilingual newspaper was for the country. Finally, on the 16th of April 2013, both communities all over the country had a newspaper that they could both read and call their own. And the reaction to it was phenomenal. A storm of comments on Facebook, coverage on major TV programs, over 12,000 likes within 5 days, nearly 27,500 shares within 5 days, over 120,000 views within 5 days.
දැන් මේ රටේ ඉන්නේ ජාතීන් දෙකයි. එකක් රටට ආදරය කරන ජාතිය, අනෙක උපම්බීමට ආදරයක් නැති සුළු පිරිස.
So again, we can talking about peace is very important, but if you can prove it and show these two people who went through a terrible time together in one place getting along, it can be a very powerful act, not necessarily an ad. Another challenge we're facing, message of peace, whether it's incredibly specific on the ground or a general message, you've got incredible competition. You're not just competing with tension, fear, and conflict. You're competing with popular music, entertainment, World Cup soccer, video games, celebrity gossip. You're competing with viral kitten videos. This is either sad, it's cute, it's sad, it's both. That's 73 million views.
That's incredible.
You're not going to play it?
You can find it. People are unfortunately highly distracted.
It's adorable.
And people's eyeballs are looking at more screens than ever. So we want to get a word in edgewise. How do we do that? We can't just assume they're going to give us their attention. We have to earn it. The consumer is in control. Ever since the remote control came along, they've been getting more and more control. They're in control. So in our communications, we have to be as bold and as provocative as the other media that they digest. Is our message as compelling as the #1 movie at the box office? Is it as interesting as the song that's in their iPod or that they're streaming on Spotify? If we begin by assuming that nobody cares about our product, it forces us to create breakthrough ideas that make people care. Ideas so creative, they have the power to change human behavior. And when we create an idea, a powerful idea, people will want to share it, which brings us to our third challenge, which is also an opportunity. One-way communication is now two-way. Advertising used to be easy. There were 3 networks. We could put a commercial on TV, tell people how great our product was, and go home and make a martini. Now people talk back. Hopefully they will say nice things. Social media has given us an opening to start a two-way conversation with people, but again, we have to earn their attention. Nobody wants to take part in a boring conversation. Most of you are probably familiar with the Coney 2012 video. Incredible social media campaign to bring this African warlord to justice, and how that video spread online with the help of millions of people, most of whom usually don't think about conflict in Africa. But it's just that they found the subject matter and the way it was presented so compelling that they raised their digital hands and volunteered to take part in the conversation, and they shared it. So this video, created by Invisible Children for a very small budget, turned regular people into ambassadors of peace, brand ambassadors who shared it. And again, we've got 100 million views there. The right message will create millions of ambassadors for your cause, for our cause, and give the ambassadors on Embassy Row a run for their money. So how do we sell peace? Fight skepticism with proof. Make peace tangible, not just with words, but with real-world acts. Help people feel peace, what it looks like, not just in theory. Be bold. Win the competition for people's attention. Win that competition. Create bold, provocative ideas that make peace the most compelling idea in their cluttered, busy minds. And if we do that right, if we create the right message, we're going to create ambassadors who are going to spread our cause for free. They're going to raise their hands. They're going to want to participate in the process and in that two-way conversation. And finally, I would encourage everyone to reach out to new thinking. Reach out to sources of ideas that you might not be familiar with. So look at the best advertising and PR ideas in the world. If you go to the One Club, oneclub.org, you'll find dozens of award-winning ads for Gatorade, for Nike, for Old Spice. Great. But alongside that, you'll find incredible work for climate change, literacy, same-sex marriage, and yes, peace. CanLions.com is another website. Around June 15th, this website fills with incredible, amazing work. There's a piece they did last year to promote action on climate change. And the tactic was to name hurricanes after legislators in Washington who are denying climate change. So they had footage of, look at Hurricane Michelle Bachmann is moving in here and it's going to pack a wallop. This was an incredible PR generating idea. There was no media budget. They did it very cheaply. It generated millions of dollars in PR. Again, it was for climate change, but incredibly creative, bold, provocative idea. And you can find lots of those ideas. It's incredibly inspiring when you see them. So again, peace is not a product. It's much bigger than that. It's much loftier than that. And to be here talking with you about it, it's very humbling. But I would hope that someday it could be as ubiquitous and easy for someone to grab as any product off a shelf. And again, if only if it were that easy.
Thank you. All right, well, with those very inspirational words and really the challenge to us as a field, because, you know, what tension is really implicit in what we're saying with regards to needing to prove it, when at lunchtime we were saying, well, metrics, you know, not so much, because some of these things, you know, you can't prove so much. So we really do have a challenge ahead of us with regards to building our brand ambassadors, building partnerships, having the right message and the right messengers to build support. But with that, I am not going to ask any questions because I know that there's a lot of really good comments and questions in the room. We have about 25 minutes left. And so if you could, please raise your hand. We'll take maybe 3 comments or questions at a time, and you'll have to speak in the microphone so the folks who are live streaming can hear.
Thank you so much. My name is Claudia Chefs from the Center for Citizen Peacebuilding in Southern California. Thank you so much for all of your advice. I wanted to ask, as young people, how do you get people to take you seriously? You know, you already mentioned, you know, how do you get people to really, you know, how do you fight skepticism? Because there's so much skepticism, we have so much to compete with. But as young people, some people don't take us as seriously. You know, we don't have the experience, maybe we don't have a PhD. So in this field, what would you advise for young people, such as ourselves, to kind of be able to get that leverage in this field?
Thank you. Should we go up here?
Hi, my name is Brie O'Keefe, and I work for Safer World based in London. I have a bit of a challenge for Peter when he was saying that, it was really nice for you to compare the Coca-Cola advert selling piece and the different metrics to what we try and do. But I wanted to kind of challenge you when you said the people know what they're getting, which is buying and selling cans of soda. I think what's beautiful about that advert is it makes the act of buying a soda feel like being part of something bigger. And I think that that's actually what we need to be trying to do more and more, to engage a mass audience on such a vital issue. So how do we change everyday actions that people enjoy taking and make them into being part of a greater movement?
Craig down here, and then we'll get the next two in the next round. Just right down here, thanks.
Craig Zelzer from Georgetown University. Thank you very much for 3 wonderful, thought-provoking presentations. So one question, a quick comment. So one is, I think as a field, we need to do a much better job engaging the private sector in general and telling a narrative. Part of the challenge I find with the narrative is, what are we asking people to do? Because we can sell peace, but what's the action we're asking them to take? So I'm just curious, like your reflections, what you think is the best thing we'd be asking people to do. And I think it's a debate we need to have as a field. What are we selling and what are we asking? And kind of the question is, if anyone saw the Axe commercial for peace and the deodorant, it was a brilliant commercial. It was kind of violent, kind of PC, and it's raising money for peace one day. But I wonder, what are the guidelines that should be provided for what are the companies we might want to engage actively in peace building, and what are the companies that we may not want to? And what are the products? So are there some guidelines you recommend that if a defense company wants to fund peace, is that good or not? If a company that has really bad CSR policies wants to give money to peace, is that good or not? Or what are the guidelines we should be thinking about?
Great. Thank you, Craig. So just to summarize then, we've got 3 questions. How can we be taken seriously, whether we're young people or not? Because I do think that Susan mentioned at her lunchtime remarks that all of us need to feel empowered, that we're not necessarily going meekly hat in hand to be asking for support, but empowered to be taken seriously. How do we help people feel that they're a part of something bigger, that we're movement building, inspiring people to be a part of that through their actions? And then what is that action? How are we in partnership with the right companies and selling cologne at the Super Bowl through a piece? Is that an appropriate partnership? So I'd open it up to any of you that'd like to comment.
Sure, I'll start with the challenge because I think that speaks to a couple of things. Well, yeah, you're spot on. One of the terrific bits about the Coke ad is it scratched the itch. I could take a discrete, specific action that I understood, that was easy, that made me feel good, and I bought a little piece of peace, right? And so the urge for peace, we're artificially divided, all of this, we all know, it's anxiety producing. Why doesn't this just work? Why can't we just get along? Why can't we, beat our swords into plows? Everything that we know. What do I do about it? Here, click this button, hit like, share, give me $1. Then I got it. Cool. The challenge for this field, for all of us, for a number of fields, probably most for this one, is how do I take something so big and complicated and give it a discrete, specific action that isn't just buying a product, but what is this thing? And it could be we are funding a dialogue in whatever place. We're building a community center in a war-torn region. We are building, we're supporting a home for orphans, whatever it happens to be. But you now allow me, as a consumer of political information, a consumer of products, to participate in the conclusion of the story. It isn't ever ongoing. It isn't an endless nightmare. I'm not constantly pushing water uphill, right? I rang a bell. For the price of a cup of coffee, I saved a little girl, and I got whatever letter it was. It's that making real. The question is, how do you make something as amorphous and important and almost transcendent as peace real a piece at a time.
I think it's important to be personal and maybe geographically specific. So in this case, we talked about India and Pakistan. I know people here have worked on projects that are much more specific than that. But I think that's when you put the places and the faces together and you can present them to people. So there's a one-on-one relationship between a consumer and someone in a place that could use some help. Whereas some messaging is a bit more broad. But I think if you can engage a mass audience broadly, then you can find ways, certain projects, to engage them in a more substantial way and raise money.
Can I have something on two of the question parts? When I started our coalition, everybody was in their little silo. And so I had groups that were child survival, and I had groups that were focused on food security, and I had, all these little silos. And people didn't see themselves as a community. And you know what? We weren't very effective. And it is so important that you see yourself as a community, especially the woman who talked about yourself as a young person. You have enormous power. I go up to Capitol Hill, and you're who they want. They don't want me. I'm an old lady to them. They want you. They know I'm going to vote. They don't know you're going to vote. They want you. I bring up these young veterans, and that's who they want to talk to and hear. You have enormous power to tell your story. But go in as a community, and I tie that into your question about the corporate world. The corporations, when I started working with them on these issues, they largely came into the issue of, I'll call it, the development community out of a philanthropic interest. It looked good. But that's not how they do it anymore. This is bottom line, because where there are the emerging markets and a lot of the conflict zones are where their businesses are going to go. So if you can go in and you can calm the waters through the programs you're doing, guess what? They will make money. So you go to those corporations. I'm not sure I'm going to address the exact answers of some of the businesses that I work with that are in the Lockheed Martin and Boeing space that I work with. But on some of these corporations, the Coca-Colas and the Walmarts and the Nikes of the world, they want what you're doing to be successful, because if you are successful, they will be successful. The business community is absolutely interested in what you are doing, and go out and sell and be a voice and be proud of what you're doing, because it is in their interest for you to be successful. So I think there is an enormous messaging to be successful about bringing young people, be a community that stands together, and be a message that goes out to the American business community and say, partner with us.
I would build just quickly on that. When you organize a community, numbers are fantastic, and then also what's your idea, what's your point of view, and how is it different? So you want to differentiate yourself. Find an idea that sets you up so that people want to talk about you, and you become important, and people want to talk to you. This idea of transparency, actually, I know you've written a lot about that, which it's a fascinating subject. You can actually use it to your advantage. By working with these companies, they realize they can't get away with stuff anymore. Some of them would love to, but they can't. So if they want to show the world that they're doing good, and they want to partner with good people, so we can use that to actually work together, and then we can help people. They can make some money. It's a win-win.
Doing good and doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it occurs to me that part of making them feel a part of a movement is to bring them into our organizations and our work, and to engage them in that two-way conversation about what we're all doing, and invite them to join the Alliance for Peacebuilding. So we have time for just a couple quick last 2, 3, because we have 2 minutes left. So maybe these are comments and questions.
Thank you. I think it's on. Yes. My name is Jamil Simon. I'm a filmmaker, and I work at the intersection of peacebuilding and media. And I think as a practice, peacebuilders need to build a connection between peace and peacebuilding. It may sound obvious, but I don't think that's really happening. And the other thing is that talking about addressing the economic argument that you were making. You know, every time we talk about stopping a weapons program, you know, all the congressmen get upset about the jobs. But there are far more jobs that are created as a result of peace than as a result of war. And that's true both here and in the world, you know, in the world where so many conflicts are happening. Peace is actually really good for it. Promotes prosperity, it promotes education, health. All the systems work better when there's peace. And I think that has to be part of the selling of it. You know, we have to, I really do feel you're right about making the economic argument. You know, war tends to enrich a very narrow portion of our economy. And whereas peace enriches a far broader, far more important, so much more durable. You know, the peace that's arrived at through peace building and negotiation is far more durable than the peace that's arrived at the end of a drone or at the end of a violent conflict. So anyway, I think that's
Thank you for your
important
comment. I apologize to those who would have your hands raised, but I do think we're going to have to finish so we keep the agenda on time. And so I'm going to say, you know, please, during the break, hopefully at the reception, feel free to continue the conversation with our panelists. Some folks from USIP did ask me to announce that for those who are interested in these kind of filmmaking spaces and opportunities to tell a story, that there is an event here on May 29th. From 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon, which is the 62nd International Film Festival. So part of messaging is telling these really quick, fun stories. And also to ask that if you did pick up one of the evaluation surveys, and if you have to leave early, please start thinking about filling out your evaluation. The folks at the Alliance would appreciate to get your feedback. Thank you very much to the panel. It was a great discussion, and thank you for your attention.